Okay, so I want to use this opportunity to welcome all the participants to this first of the webinar series during this digital literacy program. It is with excitement that I welcome you again. It is an expository and a unique webinar on exploring artificial intelligence, a pragmatic view, and future applications and information management. As a part of the training activities lined up for the valuable and timely digital literacy engagement by the National Library, I make bold to say that you are privileged to be in the environment of work when the world has become a global village. Opportunities are everywhere and handy for you to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Much more now that disruptive technologies are competing with the social and intellectual elements of humans in industries and beyond. Therefore, the conversation on pragmatic overview and application of artificial intelligence in information management is quite germane and must be of interest to proactive information specialists like you. I am confident that building your competencies on digital literacy will be lopsided if emphasis is not made on the fourth and the fifth industrial revolution, which ushers in these technologies, which are strategically positioned to either make or mar man work. Implicitly, man must understand this invention, must understand its behavior, must understand the threats, and how to address or possibly smart its creation, or better still, leverage on it to make optimal action. I think somebody is disturbing, so you can.
Yes, please.
Can you please mute the person that is disturbing?
Yes, ma'am. We are doing that, ma'am.
Artificial intelligence is one of such inventions. Information professionals must understand the opportunities it offers and utilize them effectively. Yes, understanding the elements of AI as part of this conversation will position information professionals to be in the forefront of its adoption. Our professional activities are often inundated with huge data, which proper analysis could provide information for management decisions, as well as existential justification. AI is a win-win application for such engagements. Deploying AI could eliminate repetitive tasks, process with minimal errors and time, promote easy and remote as well as personalized access to patrons with limited resources. AI is an excellent window for effective strategic dissemination of information. SDI, you know what we do in SDI. It is an important service window which library and information professionals in this part of the globe are yet to fully explore. One of the axioms I love so much, which aligns with our professional engagement, is knowledge is power and information is currency. So how can we maximize the benefit of AI and gauge its challenges if we are not abreast of what, why, how, and where of AI? Thus, using this medium, that is the webinar, we intend to foster and deepen this culture of innovation, learning, and collaboration within the world of information communities, whether it is beyond outside our shores or within our shores. We are not oblivious of the AI deployment for information services in developed countries. and some developing countries, especially in the areas of routine tasks, shelving, providing and linking physical and electronic resources for ease of access, even in enhancing management and academic reports. AI has been so good in our writing proposal, grant and research writing, data sequencing, analysis and presentation. But we are concerned that the bandwagon is leaving many of us behind. What you do not have, you cannot give. Therefore, we will engage in this conversation as a springboard to the huge benefits information professionals could derive from the world of AI today and in the future. We are therefore excited that Raymond Uzwyshyn from Mississippi State University, who is versed in IT and strategically positioned in EFLA IT section as a standing committee member, has accepted to be at the center of this conversation as the guest speaker. While we appreciate you, Ray, we encourage participants to ensure a full drink from this well of knowledge. Ensure that you defray every item of concern that could hinder your embracing or deploying AI in your world of work. Ray will actually represent the thoughts of IFLA as regards AI and or professional engagements and development. I will not fail to commend and appreciate the coordinator, Mr. Aziz Elijah, and other members of the digital literacy facilitating team who are very unrelenting, always on ground to support you and ensure that best is derived from their training. Please do pay rapt attention as Ray engages us. Know that you are always, if you do not have a very steady network, you will always get the recording when you do not have it. So you don't need to bother yourself so much, but make every effort because you are hearing from the sources one. And when you join live, you'll be in a position to ask questions. Thank you and God bless you as we engage in this webinar. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that brief introduction to the topic in line. God bless you, ma. Before I bring Dr. Ray on board, I would like to encourage every participants to please have a jotter and a pen of your own because you have a lot of things to take home today, and I wouldn't like you to miss any points. Like you can see here with me, I have my own jotter. Likewise, I have my pen. So permit me to introduce properly our resource person for the day. So today we are having Dr. Raymond. He's an associate dean from Mississippi State University. Dr. Raymond has worked professionally over the past 20 years in information technology and research libraries, academics, business and entrepreneurial environments. He possesses a PhD from New York University in Media Studies, an MBA IT Management, and Masters of Library and Information Science from the University of Western Ontario. Dr. Ray has worked in research libraries and technology and has current interest in AI, digital content, digital resources, digital libraries, data science, and data-related areas. He also trains people to develop, implement, and understand new technologies, innovations, and possibilities for their libraries, institutions, and associations. Currently, he is an Associate Dean of Research Collections and Strategy for Mississippi State University Libraries, where he provides strategic leadership for staff, research collections, new technology, and innovation. Previously, he had served as Director of Digital Service and Collection for Texas State University Library. Director of Library for American Public University System, Online Libraries and E-Learning, heads Digital and Learning Technologies for the University of West Florida Libraries and Web Services Librarian, University of Miami. He is also presently the editor of the IFLA IT section, Trends and Issues in Library Technology, IFLA IT Communication Teams and IT Standing Committee member. He is the founder of IFLA social media channel, Facebook. He is also a member of IFLA Special Interest Group in Big Data and Artificial Intelligence. He is also the editor of special issues on libraries and big data, artificial intelligence, cultural heritage, agile project management, and open science. Join me with a round and sounding of applause as I bring on board Dr. Ray. Dr. Ray, you are welcome.
Thank you, Elijah.
Doctor.
Thank you, Elijah, and thank you, Dr. Chinwe Anunobi. I'm extremely excited to actually be giving this talk. I think it's a historic, pivotal moment for Nigeria and the world. And I think this presentation is going to be fantastic in terms of both a pragmatic overview in terms of artificial intelligence, giving a bit of the history, but also coming up to speed in terms of where we are today. This is also going to be a pragmatic overview in terms of general artificial intelligence, but also in terms of future applications for information management and libraries. And I hope to bring everybody up to speed here in terms of this presentation. It's an extremely exciting time that we're entering right now. And I would like Nigeria also and the Nigerian librarians to be part of this exciting moment. It's a pivotal time in history we are experiencing. And I really feel privileged to be invited to speak with both of you and the Nigerian library community. I wanted to begin with talking a little bit about the last 10 years of incredible progress in artificial intelligence. We're really entering an amazing time. The part of artificial intelligence I will be speaking about is called machine learning or deep learning, or what they call neural nets. It's really where all the action is. And it consists of three areas: excellent algorithms, computing power, and large data sets. And I'll be talking about all of that a little later. Many of you know that natural language processing, computer vision, and facial recognition, you might have seen some of the things going on the web, have resulted in great discoveries. Here you see a picture of cancer cell detection that has been, the top left, use a computer called AlphaGo by DeepMind, beating the world's Go champion that previously the world thought impossible to beat, because Go was a game that combined mathematics and human creativity. At the bottom here, I have also put down conversational chatbots. And I'm sure you've all heard of Chat GPT. Here, I'll be talking about another chatbot that I'm going to show you how to actually create in this presentation. I've called her Dr. Amina Okoye. She's a Nigerian information librarian. And later in the talk, I'll show you how to enable her through ChatGPT. It's an extremely exciting time for all areas of the world and all libraries. And it's an excellent time to be presenting this type of presentation globally and to Africa. So I wanted to step back now as we get into this and just outline a couple histories with which you might not be as familiar with. And this has to do with AI and artificial intelligence and how it has developed. AI really begins in the 1950s in the USA and Britain. You might have heard of some of the main figures. One of the main ones, his name was Alan Turing, and he was a Brit. You may have heard of the Turing test for artificial intelligence. It's probably the most famous test, and the test is to determine whether someone answers you on a computer, is it a human or is it an artificial intelligence? The other person that I mentioned here, John McCarthy on the left, organized a conference in the 1950s called the Dartmouth Conference. At that conference, for the attendees, the term artificial intelligence was coined. One of the most famous students of artificial intelligence was also there. He lived until the 1990s, and his name was Marvin Minsky. In the 1960s, we actually got our first chatbot. And that chatbot was invented by a German called Joseph Weizenbaum, who happened to be at MIT at that time. That chatbot was called Eliza. And that chatbot also set the beginnings of chat on, it was not on a web at that time, it was on a mainframe and a network. Marvin Minsky also started with artificial intelligence, but he was not a fan of the big neural nets that we have today. He actually set back this type of research because he said that there was no future at that time. He was right, though, because of the processing power that was lacking at that time. And I'll talk about that a little later. During this time, as the 60s progressed to the 70s and the 80s and 90s, we had really a time of AI winter. The processing power was not fast enough. The storage was too expensive. And that progressed until the 1990s. In the 1990s, some of you may remember, I'm sure some of you are too young, but I remember it, in 1997, when a Russian was beaten by a computer, IBM's Deep Blue, in a chess game. Artificial intelligence at that time was back, and there was an understanding that the processing power of computers was getting much more robust. At that time, too, there was an older fellow who had been pursuing artificial intelligence since the 1970s or late 60s. His name was Geoffrey Hinton. And at the University of Toronto in Canada, where I'm originally from, he was still pursuing neural nets and artificial intelligence in the deep learning or machine learning area, which most people had abandoned. His students and his graduate students were the people that now are the leaders in artificial intelligence around the globe. Around the 2010s, those students started to go to different places. Google, Meta, Facebook, Amazon, and the processing power had become so powerful that these applications that previously was not possible became possible. Why did it become possible? This is an important law which some of you may have heard of, some of you may not have. It's very important in terms of artificial intelligence. It's called Moore's Law. And what it means is that the number of transistors on an integrated circuit doubles every 2 years. On the bottom of the graph, you see a timeline from 1971 to 2021. On the vertical area of the timeline, on the left of the timeline, you see the number of transistors from 10,000 at the very bottom to 10 billion at the very top. Now, in 1970, there were only 5,000 transistors possible on a microchip. As the 70s progressed, by 1982, in the chatbot, the first chatbot that I talked about, ELIZA, you were able to use that chatbot on a mainframe and a terminal, but it took 50,000 transistors, and you really had to use it at a university in terms of borrowed time. By the 1990s, late 90s, you can see again Deep Blue and Kasparov in the middle of the graph. That took 5 million of these transistors on a microchip to beat the world chess champion. Now, just moving up to closer to where we are here, in 2014, when artificial intelligence started to get very, very interesting and people started thinking to themselves, this is going to actually, as a methodology, you could see it was taking 5 with 9 zeros, that's 5 billion transistors on that same little microchip to power artificial intelligence. Right now, some of you have probably also heard about NVIDIA and the A and H100. I've got a picture of it right here at the top. And NVIDIA's H100 is the processor that is powering all of artificial intelligence today. You really need hundreds and thousands of these processors to train our models, which I'll be talking about. The other part of artificial intelligence, because it's a big story here, and it's important especially for librarians to understand this, because this has to do with digital storage and digital preservation and storing and memory, which we're also involved in through digital preservation. And so what you can see here on the left of the graph is the cost of data storage and memory for AI in the cost per terabyte. On the bottom of the graph, on the x-axis, you can see from 1964 to 2022, the dates. Going to the top of the graph on the left, in 1964, for 1 terabyte of memory storage, it was more than $1 trillion. Really impossible for any even country or Eurozone globe to afford anything like that. Going down to the middle of the graph, in terms of the cost, you can see by the middle of the 2000s, or let's just go to 1990, it was $1 million per terabyte, and that's US dollars. Still very expensive for a terabyte of memory. By the 2000s, you can see that the terabyte per memory was actually going very, very far down, 100,000, so a corporation could afford it. And now, if you go all the way up to where I have the red circle here, 2022, and I've extrapolated it to 2024, that same 1 terabyte of storage costs only $50 to $100 USD. For those 2 reasons that I've just outlined, artificial intelligence becomes possible. Now, I wanted to move immediately here to libraries and putting the pieces together for everybody. As I've mentioned at the very top, AI requires processing power, the microprocessors. Those in artificial intelligence are not called CPUs, but actually GPUs. Those are graphical processing units, and they're made mostly right now by NVIDIA. NVIDIA was originally a game company, but those GPUs were also found very useful for artificial intelligence. Google has also developed their own GPUs. They don't call them GPUs, they call them TPUs, which stands for Tensor Processing Unit. And a tensor processing unit is the same thing as a GPU, but it uses a different type of matrix math that's based on tensors. Now here you can see the Texas data repository. The bottom left is all those GPUs, storage units, in terms of a storage room. The middle here shows you the actual data repository, which is online. Now, what I wanted to say about this is before artificial intelligence, we actually used the data sets or the data research repositories to actually explore an academic's data, be able to publish that data online. This is research from experiments, track the person's data, and then collaborate and share data. Now, this for Texas, we started this in 2014 and we finished it in 2017. And it's a very good tool for beginning artificial intelligence. To actually start this type of work, you need data, which is the content of artificial intelligence, and that begins with data research repositories, which were typically housed in libraries. Now, there's a clear trajectory in libraries from data collection, as I've mentioned, to data science, to data repositories, to data analytics, which means actually working with the data and working with it in ways that also involve data visualization. And you could see a couple of visualizations in the middle. And this is what all of the excitement was about from, I would say, from 2014 to 2019, setting the stage for artificial intelligence. Data visualization was the final step in terms of deriving insight and discovery from an academic research project or a question you wanted answered. And that was where we were at in terms of the cutting edge. But we've moved on now to that next step, which is artificial intelligence. I want to emphasize the data repositories, though, because they are the important step that allows building skills, especially for librarians, for AI. In terms of actually these data repositories, they're still extremely important in terms of the foundations of artificial intelligence. And here you can see Harvard's data repository. And Texas, the state where I worked, we based our repository on Harvard's Dataverse. And this is an open source repository, which is really available to anybody to download and configure, including Nigeria. Now here you can see an example of the metadata in terms of the records and the data that is being uploaded into Harvard's data repository. You can see I circled the data citation here, and you can see the actual metadata. All of that labeling, which is what the computer scientists call metadata, that labeling is very, very important to artificial intelligence. And here, this is where all the librarians come in on this. Clean data is needed for further processing of this data, which includes data visualization, but also, ironically, but not so ironically, AI. And libraries have a central place in this food chain of actually labeling this data for artificial intelligence. So here I've put a picture of the research data repository cycle. And again, this is setting the better foundations and organization for AI infrastructures. And you can see actually in this cycle, it begins with that academic on the left, capturing their project data from their experiments or surveys. And this is typically your researchers at your universities or scientists, you know, in Nigeria, gathering agricultural or medical data. And then librarians helping to catalog or assign metadata schemas to that data. And they're specialized in terms of disciplinary taxonomies. Then that data is uploaded to the repository where it could be retrieved or downloaded in terms of relevant data sets instantaneously. These are the basic elements that are needed in terms of that data for machine learning and open science and research needs, because, as you can see in the middle, it allows that synthesization of the research to provide answers to those questions in terms of machine learning. Now, the last 5 years, as I've mentioned, has shown incredible progress of analytic computation tools, particularly AI, machine learning, deep learning, computer vision. And again, I want to mention that AI is a huge discipline, and this Venn diagram emphasizes that with the big blue circle, and that neural networks or deep learning, which everybody is really excited about today, is really only a subset of one part of artificial intelligence that currently is where all the action is. Now, I've circled both the data research repository, where typically in academic libraries or in national libraries, there is a data repository, and in online institutional repositories. Those are key elements for some of the global work in open science that's being done with artificial intelligence. So my first recommendation here in terms of putting together these types of infrastructures for artificial intelligence has to do with putting together a digital scholarship ecosystem as the foundation for AI. I'm not going to go through all of these open source software components that are all freely available, but I'm going to mention that those two primary components, the research data repository and the digital collections repository, which are available to anyone to download and configure in terms of the libraries, are very important to the ecosystem around artificial intelligence. And I'm going to give an example of how this works globally that I think is also very pertinent towards Nigeria and Africa, because it uses another developing country example. This is an article of dermatologist level classification of skin cancer with deep neural networks from Nature. And here you can see, in terms of the main image, the cancer cells divided into benign, which is not actually cancerous, and malignant, which is cancerous. And the neural net needs to decide in terms of which of these cancer cells are going to cause cancer and cause the patient to actually get sick from this, or which ones the doctor doesn't have to worry about in terms of those melanomas. Now, the cancer cells, the doctors actually label those cancer cells in terms of looking at them and making their diagnosis. And they're put into data sets. As I mentioned, here is the Harvard Dataverse. Here is also an example of one of those large data sets that contains all of these images here on this picture, labeled by dermatologists, into a large collection of multi-source dermatoscopic images of common pigment lesions. These are all labeled by a librarian in terms of the metadata schema, and this is enabled for anyone to download from around the world. Now what happens here in terms of the neural nets is that the neural nets are actually trained on this data. So what you see here is that the neural net looking at the skin lesion image on the very left at the top, and then going through from left to right at the very top, and being trained in terms of the various layers of neurons to tell which is a benign cancerous cell and which is a malignant one. Now, the way that it could train the cancer cells, the model, is because that data has all been labeled. So at the end, we know which, from the base chord set, which is cancerous and which is benign. And later on, new examples could be put in on what's called trained models. So the first step in actually creating an artificial intelligence is actually training the model with data. And so good data and good labeled data is always the beginning of these models. Now here, I wanted to point out this example because again, it's very pertinent for Nigeria. And you have to actually look here at what this is. This is a thesis, not from the West or Stanford or Vienna and Europe, but from Brack University, and you can see that at the top left, in Bangladesh. And in Bangladesh, some students had actually done their undergraduate thesis using the previous documents and the article and data, downloading that from Harvard and the Dataverse and Stanford for the algorithm to actually do their training of the neural nets with data that they had from Bangladesh. Here is the thesis that they produced, which is again a variation of the previous article that I mentioned, but using the different skin color and the different cells of the populations from the people in Bangladesh. And so you can see here the title is an efficient deep learning approach to detect skin cancer. And this resulted in fulfillment of the degree for a Bachelor's of Computer Science at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at Brack University. I highlighted here again on the very left the dataset description, which again involved all that metadata and cataloging that in libraries we're very, very good at. and the data set pre-processing, which again is all of that cataloging and metadata composition. On the very right, I wanted to mention here that it's amazing that this was produced with all of these different people from various corners of the globe actually putting this information together through the internet. And this really is the progress of knowledge through global open science and network possibilities. I'll outline this just briefly again because I'm going through a lot here. So the first article I mentioned again to summarize was that 2017 Stanford Nature Deep Learning Cancer article that I showed you. From there in 2018, a Viennese doctor in Austria uploaded his dermatological image library to Harvard's Dataverse data repository in 2018. In 2021, these adventurous undergraduates in Bangladesh downloaded the article from Stanford, which was in the preprint server that contained the algorithm, and the data set from the Viennese doctor to use as the base for their own population's AI detection for cancer cells in Bangladesh populations. And in July 2022, from Texas, I found this thesis, I was quite surprised, from Bangladesh that contained all of these elements together, and thought, wow, this is a great example of global open science and artificial intelligence that I presented in Galway and Dublin at the IFLA Library Conference in a big data presentation, because at that time, artificial intelligence was not really a thing yet, and people were not overly interested in it, actually. It was still a very, very small crowd that was pursuing these things. So as I mentioned, artificial intelligence has many paradigms and origins. We're dealing right now with a very small set of these. This is, you can see in yellow, deep learning, machine learning. It's only one of the main 5 paradigms. I'm not going to go through the rest of the 5 in this talk. Its origin is in neuroscience and neural nets. And a good book to read if you're interested in other areas of artificial intelligence or the larger discipline is called The Master Algorithm by Dr. Pedro Dominguez, who's out of the University of Washington. And what's happening right now, since there's so much action, just to give you a perspective on deep learning and machine learning, that little corner in yellow, is that the other areas are sort of being folded into deep learning and machine learning. So there is research still going on these other areas, but they've become sort of sub areas of deep learning where major discoveries have been made. So here I've got our Dr. Amina Okoye, I called her, from Nigeria. And I wanted to actually highlight her here because, again, the last 10 years, and especially right now, have made amazing progress in AI, where especially this neural network, the circle Venn diagram at the bottom, that little piece has become extremely important. And it has allowed us to make what's called large language models, or LLMs, GPTs, or which stands for generative pre-trained transformers, which allow conversational chatbots and robotic agents that are extremely powerful. And I'll be talking about Dr. Amina Okoye a little later in terms of showing you how to use this kind of chatbot and create one in Nigeria. The artificial intelligence possible with natural language processing and the answers possible are really, really amazing. And this really is all building on these previous experiments that had occurred that I mentioned in terms of DeepMind and AlphaGo and these early medical AI experiments. My first encounter really with the GPTs, and this really gets into the library and artificial intelligence in libraries area, occurred, I suppose, in terms of we had been working on artificial intelligence since 2017, and it was a very small, boring community, very quiet, not too many people. I don't think there was more than 25 and in terms of libraries, and at the conferences I attended, and there was another 25 people that were also interested in ethics. But in January of 2022, we decided to do a special issue on in the IFLA bulletin on artificial intelligence in libraries, and the National Library of Spain submitted a very interesting article on digital transformation, data reuse, and heritage collections in their Spanish archives. They had collected all of the Spanish language documents on the web. And when I first of all looked at the article, I thought to myself, wow. And you can see in terms of here, the corpora, that the BNE stands, it's in Spanish, and it's Biblioteca Nacional España, so the National Library of Spain. And they had collected, you can see, 201 million web documents in Spanish. Now, when I saw this, first of all, I thought, okay, well, that's very interesting. And then the number of tokens, I wasn't actually even sure what a token was at that time, converted to 135 billion. And those are the division of words that are divided from, that come out of those documents that become the parameters for artificial intelligence. And I started investigating this. I had to read the article about 4 times, and I wondered to myself, is it the Spanish that things were lost in translation, or is something really exciting happening here? And I thought to myself, well, it seems like something very exciting, but I'm still not sure what it was. But this was my first encounter on OpenAI and GPT. You can see here it was GPT-2, and the red circle shows that. And the National Library of Spain here very intelligently was partnering with their supercomputing center. I thought their supercomputing center had a very interesting name. It was called Mare Nostrum, Black Horse. And they were partnering, the National Librarian told me, they were partnering with the Black Horse. And they really didn't know also what this was all about, but they really wanted to actually work with all of the Spanish language documents on the web. And I know you have different languages also in Nigeria, and they wanted to be deriving summaries and intelligence from it. And I thought to myself, well, that's a great idea. But, and this was the first, my first encounter. In November of that same year, the story gets very interesting for the entire world. From a very boring topic of very few people, I would say not too many, the world exploded. In November of 22, chat GPT 3.5. So they skipped, I never saw 3, even though I experimented with 2, but they released 3.5, and it generated human-like texts. It shocked the world. It wrote and it chatted naturally. It extended the previous model, the Spanish model that I had seen. It was rudimentary. It seemed to be rudimentarily intelligent. It wasn't anything that you would write home to your mother about, as they say here in the West. But it was very interesting. But this next model sort of blew things away, blew a lot of people away. This is the company here I've highlighted on the top right that I still think is the most important company in terms of artificial intelligence in the world. On the very right, you see Ilya Sutskever, who's the chief scientist, a student of the fellow that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, Geoffrey Hinton, who had been pursuing artificial intelligence and these neural nets since the 60s with very, very little success, but who had also been following that processing power progression and storage cost diminution. So that combination was enabling amazing things. I'm not going to go through all of these areas here. You can look at these later, but ChatGPT 3.5 was really a watershed moment. The other figures here you can see the Sam Altman. I'm sure all of you are familiar with him. He's the OpenAI CEO, and then Satya Nadella at the bottom, the chief scientist or chief executive officer from Microsoft. Both enabled very different things. Satya enabled the processing power that I was talking about through Azure and NVIDIA and all of those put together processors. And then Altman and Sutskever and Greg Brockman put together those algorithms for the neural nets to actually do that job together. Now, I wanted to fast forward now to where we are. I've given you a very quick history now in terms of going forward, and it's a super exciting time. I'm right now moving towards actually a very February 2024, right where we are today. On this diagram, you can see the most important large language models right now, I think, in the world. And these are all rated by size. There's a metaphor here that has to do with the planets of our solar system, and the 1.76 T you see by GPT-4 on the very left is the 1.76 trillion parameters that the model is trained on. Parameters are, as I mentioned, there's data that goes into the model. The model actually produces tokens out of that data. So if you could think of all of the words going in, first from all of those words are tokenized and they become tokens. And then those tokens, such as, for example, I was thinking in terms of Africa, the word elephant. And just to give you an example of what a parameter is, those parameters become quantized or statistical representations. So for example, with an elephant, you would think to yourself that elephants are gray. And there's a particular statistical chance that when you see an elephant, or there's an elephant in a sentence, if there's gray in the sentence, that might pertain to the elephant. There's a high statistical probability. And the model, in terms of actually looking at all the words in its universe, will actually look at the word and then derive the parameters for gray in relation to the elephant. And it might say it's pretty high. Now, it might also have the word, for example, Mars or Jupiter. That sometimes maybe somebody has named their elephant Jupiter or Mars, but it's not too likely, so that the parameter statistical output will be actually low for that, maybe 0, where gray comes up at 0.40% or 0.20% to be actually associated with elephant. Jupiter will be very low in terms of association. Because of that huge trillion parameterization, the large language model become artificially intelligent or parameterized or statistical inference models or proxies for human intelligence. It's a very interesting methodology. I'm not going through all of the details, but this is what's happening. Now, in terms of the also the most important models here, there's two that you need to remember. One, GPT-4. It's our best model, hands down. Still, even though the main competitor who's releasing all of their models is Google. And Google has produced Gemini, the best model in terms of Gemini, and it was just really released in the past month, is called Gemini 1.5. We've already moved actually past this slide, which is also, this is a fairly new slide, but actually we've moved past this slide to already Gemini 1.5. But Gemini 1.5 is still not as good as GPT-4. The MOE by GPT-4 underneath it stands for mixture of experts. And I'm not going to go into that, but it's an important term to know. And that Gemini also is a mixture of experts model. You can see 3.5 here as one of the moons of Jupiter above GPT-4. And that just gives you an idea of how much bigger the language model is between 3.5 to 4. Now, the reason that that's important is because as these models get bigger, they get more intelligent. And I'm going to talk about that a little now. I wanted to mention before that there's two other models that I should mention that also are very important, but I'm not going to be talking about today. In terms of, one is Ernie, which is the Chinese model, and that's Baidu's model. And the other, which is also set to be released this year that nobody has seen yet, is Amazon's, which is there's a guess that it's 2 trillion parameters, but nobody has seen that. And also to mention here, GPT-4, OpenAI is releasing their next model, as well as, well, Google just released Gemini 1.5, but the competition is very much heating up. Now, as I've mentioned, the GPTs, or generative trained transformers, are all becoming extremely intelligent. We're moving from, as you can see, in terms of the number of parameters that I've talked about a little, from GPT-1, 117 million parameters, to 2, which the Spanish National Library used, which was 10 times that much, 1.5 billion parameters, to what the world started to get excited about, GPT 3.5, which was also 1.5. Well, this is wrong on the slide, but it should be 15 billion parameters, or 100. I think this slide is a little off in terms of that. But the main thing to know is that as the parameters increase, the models get smarter. Now here, I wanted to actually talk about this intelligence. So you can ask yourself, well, Ray, how do we know the models are getting smarter? And then why is this artificial intelligence? What are the benchmarks here? What's actually showing us intelligence? So as I've talked about this a little bit, I've mentioned GPT 3.5, and that's actually the light blue model here, the light blue circles here, and then GPT-4, and that's the purple circles here. This chart is a chart of the human intelligence tests for university entrance, or graduate school entrance, or high school tests in the West. So these are all the tests that we use in the West to, for example, get into graduate school, whether you're going to be a lawyer or a librarian or a doctor, or also these are the tests that are used for advanced placement in high school, in terms of the tests that are used to actually test the students, or the test to actually get into university, the standard application tests in the United States and Canada and some parts of the West. These are also all of the students that take the tests are ranked on these tests. Now you can see here at the very top of the test, in terms of verbal acuity on the graduate school test, the graduate record exam, GPT-4 is in the 99th percentile. What that means, it means it beats 99% of the students that actually take the test. On the law exam, for actually lawyers that are being trained and finishing law school, it beats 90% of the lawyers that are actually studying for the bar exam. In terms of, for example, advanced placement biology, the final test in biology for high school students, it beats 85% of all of the students taking that test. It doesn't do as well on quantitative disciplines. For example, to get into graduate school in a quantitative discipline, it's only beating 80% of the students. But it's still, if you want to also consider it another way, it's better than 80% of the students that are thinking about mathematics on a graduate school level to actually take those tests. As you can see, it's not uniformly great in some areas. So for example, in calculus, there's room to go here, because it's only actually beating 43% of the students. And then in coding, which involves programming, mathematical logic, a combination of English literary skills and writing plus mathematics, that's the one that it actually does most poorly on, but they're very much working on that, and that's I'm not going to talk about that here, but it's making very rapid progress in many ways. I wanted to turn here just a little bit in terms of the libraries and where the libraries in the West have really started, and things really didn't begin to ramp up for the libraries, well, probably about the same time in 2017 to 2018. I first started to see artificial intelligence applications, first of all, coming out of, as you would imagine, the Ivy League in America. Yale had produced a very interesting art image categorization project, just like I showed with regards to the cancer, but instead of classifying cancer images in terms of benign or others, they were classifying art historical images. And I thought that was very interesting for their art libraries. And I thought that was a very interesting use of neural nets, the first time I had seen that. I also was attending these very interesting conferences that related to, as I mentioned earlier in our talk, data and those foundational data research repositories that the libraries were putting together for our research professors at all of the universities in the United States and Canada. To apply for a grant right now in the United States or in the larger West, you need to make your data public. And that meant putting it into a data research repository. And so many of the libraries at the universities were ramping this up, and we were putting that together. And conferences started to be had around those topics in terms of data. This was one at Carnegie Mellon University that I attended on artificial intelligence for data discovery and reuse. And the libraries were really part of the data discovery and reuse, but the artificial intelligence people also started to show up at these conferences because they were using the data repositories for content. And so the library people started to get exposed to all of these different areas. At that time in Texas, we also started working on these image projects, which seemed to be where a lot of the action was, and it was really easier for us than the language models at that time because, well, for many reasons. Here you can see sports is very important in the United States, and because of that, funding for those areas is easier. And here you can see the artificial model or intelligence model identifying a player's jersey number. And number 11, it was 81% sure that that player was Smith. And that was important to our donors who were actually funding these projects that had deep pockets and were interested not so much in artificial intelligence, but looking at all of the historical 100 years of football pictures to find the players that they were interested in when they went to school. And that ended up actually funding our projects. Other projects in terms of the history of our area, this was in Texas, As you can see, men with horses, but also babies here. These are all newspaper photographs that were being identified by artificial intelligence. But you could see also the models were not getting things right. You can see in this baby photo, particularly, the photo says person. The artificial intelligence got that right with 98% accuracy. That's the 0.986. And then instead of saying that the baby is carrying a rattle, the artificial intelligence put down cell phone. And it was 71% sure that it was correct, but it's completely wrong. But these projects, in terms of were very important in terms of everybody working out these models. It's very important. I wanted to include this because it's very important to be making these types of mistakes, because the mistakes eventually lead to better results and better discovery. But things all begin with a series of mistakes that get better over time. And I'm trying to show this in this slide. Also, the next one. So I've taken you through, begin to take you through a whirlwind journey of the history of AI, but you've got to remember the rest of the talk, the beginnings of the talk now, because now we're going to be benchmarking the GPTs that I've been talking about in terms of human intelligence. And this is also takes all of these tests that I mentioned previously and puts this together into what's called a massive multitask language understanding test. They call it the MMLU. And it benchmarks the average human against this series of tests. As I mentioned, when GPT-2 came out, it was at 32 on the MMLU. They benchmarked it as 32.4. And the average human on these tests only scores 34.5%. So it was close, but it was definitely not better than the average human. So nobody was overly excited at that time. Just moving a little forward, when OpenAI released, and this is what really caused the world, I suppose, to take note, released GPT 3.5, you can see the average human was 34.5. All of a sudden, the language model, by increasing that parameter count, hit 70, double the intelligence of the average human. That caused everyone to take note. Where we are right now, and that's moving to actually the other most important model that I mentioned, is GPT-4. And here where we're at is the human expert level. What that means is that the models are getting so good, they're close right now in terms of being better on all levels, on all subjects, at all human experts. So for example, medical doctor that's an expert in cancer, GPT-4 will be still less powerful on average or less knowledgeable than that doctor, but it's coming very, very close. And in the next couple of years, in terms of January, slide was from January 24, but you can imagine in terms of January 25, these models also will be better than human experts on all levels. Now, Here again is that standardized North American high school, university, and graduate school tests. I'm not going to go through all of these again, but this gives you another view of just how intelligent these models are becoming. It's just incredible when you start thinking about it technologically. And these models are also available to everyone. I hope you know, but if you don't, that ChatGPT is available through Microsoft Copilot right now. It's in, I would call it, some people would call it an amputated version, but it is a more censored version. If you want to get the full model, you have to get it through OpenAI, and there's a subscription cost. As I understand, I pay $20 US a month, but I understand that for the developing world, if you apply through OpenAI, there's different costs that you can get it through there. But the use case scenarios for ChatGPT, which I'm recommending still as the hands down best model. I'll be glad to talk about others in the questions, but that model is still, in my benchmarking and others that I follow, the best for general knowledge seeking, business development, marketing analysis, education and learning, tutoring, language learning, content creation, all kinds of creativity, data analysis in terms of summarization, analyzing data, wellness and mental health, and thinking about it that way, and as a personal assistant. I wanted to talk here about OpenAI's GPT store, which is also very interesting. If you've never heard of it, it's very interesting, especially in terms of librarians and research and analysis, and being able to actually everything from writing related tasks to research and analysis to programming, education help, and business help. I've highlighted here parts of the ChatGPT that I think are a very good first entrance to these different areas that I would recommend, especially for libraries. I do find some of them actually not fully worked out yet, compared to the models, but it's a great time to be getting in. Especially if you are coming from our background in terms of librarians and trained in these areas, it's interesting to look at what is possible through research and analysis through some of these tools. I have to say still, I don't think they're as good as ProQuest or EBSCO databases, but they're interesting in terms of what they're doing and they're worth checking out. Similarly, for education and resources, I think that the GPTs are fantastic for librarians that are helping students from kindergarten to grade 12 and university with topics ranging from mathematics to primers to try to learn things, to computer coding, to really various topics ranging from math to the natural world. And I would suggest people trying these out. Customized chat is very much also coming in. So you can place who you are in terms of your background and your education and the level you want the model to answer you on, and GPT will answer, and this is also available through OpenAI. I've put down GPT 4.5, but this is not widely released, but anybody who has the subscription, this is also released in a pre-release right now, and this will provide contextual answers depending on your background. So I will typically put in my education, my interests, my age, where I'm based, what I do for work, what a few of my hobbies and interests, and GPT will take that into consideration when it answers me. In terms of libraries here, we're really in an amazing type of era. Yes, there are new classes of AI competencies needed for research, subject analysis, and metadata, but it's an amazing time. And I'm going to be talking in a second about prompt engineering and this type of actually eliciting responses from the model, which is really, really interesting. And I want to actually focus a little about that, but there's also new opportunities for library faculty and staff to be working in these areas. IFLA is, I'm part of a book that I'm editing right now that will be published in 2024, which will talk also about AI in libraries in terms of actually getting up to speed there. But I also wanted to focus on, in this talk, a little about, finally, I promised everybody, but I really want to get to it here, about prompt engineering and creating a GPT model personas for Nigeria and Africa. This is an example of using a persona, and I have created a persona for GPT-4 called Dr. Amina Okoye. And Dr. Amina Okoye, and I use this is a prompt on the very left that you can place into the customization aspect that I was mentioning on GPT-4 to use the vast trillion parameter data resources of the model. And what you do essentially is you ask the model to embody this persona and answer as that persona. The prompt really sets the stage for the language model GPT-4 to provide detailed, informed responses to a wide array of questions within Dr. Okoye's expertise, offering valuable perspectives. And here I've set up Dr. Okoye to offer valuable perspectives on improving health outcomes and promoting sustainable development in Nigeria and similar African contexts. How do you do that? Well, it's not that difficult with the model. So you ask the model, first of all, and I place this here for everybody to later feel free to actually copy and use this and modify it also as you wish. So I ask the model, and you actually tell it to embody Dr. Amina Okoye, a distinguished expert in humanitarian aid with a focus on healthcare and sustainable development of information resources in Nigeria and wider sub-Saharan Africa. Then you actually set the background of Dr. Okoye. With over 20 years experience working in the field, you have a deep understanding of medical, agriculture, and humanitarian library resources. That's how you want her to answer. You are an expert in providing medical aid and education and empowerment suggestions for rural and underserved communities. Your expertise includes crisis response, maternal health, leveraging health technology for health solutions. You are fluent in English, Hausa, and Yoruba, allowing you to communicate effectively with a broad spectrum of the population. And well, you need to know these languages, but the model will answer in those languages. So it's a very interesting time to be actually working with these models. I'm not going to go through this entire prompt, but I wanted to give you an idea of what is possible here, and also for people to feel free to modify this or use this with the GPT. Here is another actually example I wanted to show that I thought would be also pertinent to Africa. This was a Caribbean Studies journal or set of journals, open access journals, done at the University of Miami around 2004. The journal has been going on for about 20 years now, and all of those journals are kept in a repository, but they're also available as PDFs. Now, what you can do right now is really interesting with GPT-4 and also Gemini. I have not tried it, or tried it a couple of times. I prefer GPT-4, but actually Gemini has a long context window. So right now 1.5 that they've released. So what you can do is actually either upload a single PDF or all of the PDFs, especially in Gemini, and ask the model to answer questions based on the 20 years of work in this Caribbean Studies journal and everything that has been represented in the journal. So it's really amazing in terms of actually drilling down on, say, specific texts you have in Nigeria in terms of a PDF run of a journal for the past 20 or 30 years that you need information on, that can be immediately searched. But more than search, the model could actually answer to you in those languages that I mentioned that are common in Nigeria, and also bring that information back. E-resources and core academic library services systems are also transforming through AI. And here I wanted to mention that the major database vendors are all now beginning to actually take AI infrastructure angles. How this works, and I'm just going to use Clarivate and Ex Libris, Alma, Primo, and ProQuest as examples, is that the artificial intelligence, how this is integrated, has to do with still using the base models that I've talked about. GPT-4, or it's going to be 5, or Gemini Ultra. Those are called foundation models. And then the data and the infrastructure from the other software, whether that's Ex Libris Primo and their library management software, or ProQuest and their vast collection of databases, will be fine-tuned on top of that model in terms of the different areas. And so it's going to be an amazing time. I heard Ex Libris and ProQuest talk about their roadmaps in terms of 2024, which were quite ambitious in terms of getting up to speed with the AI directions. But I think most of the vendors will be very quickly following. I wanted to also mention these other areas. We're really in a very, very exciting time right now. I have to emphasize, this is really a time like Gutenberg that we're in terms of the shift that's occurring in communication technology. I'm not going to go through all of these areas, but I'm just, it's a renaissance time in terms of what's happening with artificial intelligence as both a knowledge revolution and a communication revolution. There are amazing image generators appearing from text to video or image to video or text to image that are appearing. And I can't even keep up, and I'm following it all the time. OpenAI just released an amazing model that I have it on here, but it's just been released. It's called Sora, that I would point people to take a look at. But DALL-E and Midjourney as image generators are amazing. There's amazing video generators. But there's also robots actually appearing, and then mixed media possibilities with glasses that have augmented reality plus AI. And that's the Ray-Ban glasses you could see in the top left. And that's a little camera you can see with the circle that's actually I've seen these other also glasses that are projecting images of the screen that will be through AI. It's just amazing what is occurring. The other area that I wouldn't recommend in terms of starting with, but is also very, very interesting, has to do with autonomous agents. It's also, I definitely would not recommend this for beginning, but it's a fascinating area. And the reason I'm not recommending it is it's also dangerous, but also important for librarians, especially in terms of robust information seeking. What it involves is called autonomous agents. Now, I've talked about the different language models, but I wanted to mention autonomous agents, which essentially means putting the models together into a very complex but orchestrated and organized orchestration. So here in the middle, you could see a language model. It's like a little robot that's a project manager. And the project manager, you give the model a task, a complex task. Say research this business, and I would like from this business research, I would like a website created, I would like a strategic plan created, I would like a marketing analysis created, and I would like all of the code generated to actually create a business online. The project manager at the center, the language model, will direct other language models to actually accomplish this task, these tasks, like a little factory of language models working independently and together to accomplish these tasks. It's quite amazing. And in terms of research for libraries, it's also going to be amazing. I'd be happy to answer questions about that, but it's definitely also right up there in terms of 2024 with the multimodal, and it's something to keep aware of. Now, I know I've talked your ear off here, but I wanted to begin to close, and I haven't focused this talk. I saw that you had a previous talk on ethics. And while I haven't focused on that area, ethics, safety, alignment, accuracy, precision, they are very, very important areas. I've tried to give you an idea of how quickly and importantly and also robustly the technology is going forward. But at the same time, there's large ethical questions that we need to keep in mind. While the models are good, we're really at a beginning stage. AI also hallucinates. It makes false comments. It has made up results. These are statistical incongruities. And the lying is not anything like a human lying. It's more of a statistical type of error. There's bias in the data. As they say, if good garbage in, garbage out. If the data that comes in isn't correctly labeled or it's very skewed, there's not going to be good results. There's larger questions coming up with regards to that. The models are, some of them need to be censored. Others are being censored too much. There's regulatory questions coming up with the law. All of this will be worked out. But there's larger questions. Also, somebody I noticed put a check mark by alignment. Alignment with human values is very important there. And that alignment is also important as the models get more intelligent, what they call ASI now, which is artificial superintelligence. As you saw from that previous chart I showed, the models are already past 90% of most humans. When they start hitting that super intelligent level, they need to be aligned with human values. Those are very, very important questions. For the West, probably also Nigeria, deep fakes and elections, manipulation of the population, propaganda, all of that is very, very important, and important in terms of literacy, artificial intelligence literacy. And one of my friends actually in South Africa, Lynn Kleinveld, a librarian at one of the South African universities, has written about artificial intelligence literacy and the need for libraries to be working in those areas. The time has come. So as I mentioned, just to begin to close, we're really at this pivotal, changing, incredible time. It's a great time to be giving this talk. It's a great time. I'm very heartened to hear that both Elijah and Chinwe, the National Librarian of Nigeria, contacted me to actually give this talk. It's an incredible but very important time to be taking these types of questions and infrastructures very seriously. We're at a time when we're now moving from artificial intelligence to artificial general intelligence. Some people say that's already been achieved and we're past that time. Others say we've got to wait for the robots. And then we're entering the time of artificial superintelligence. Now, just to begin to close this talk, I've put links here for everybody that are current to February 2024. I put the GPT-4 language models, the main language models, and then put the main image generators and the autonomous agents, but also giving you here on the right to keep up with this deluge of news that is coming out, websites of some of the main commentators that actually provide the weekly to weekly news. And there's just tons of it coming out. And I would recommend that these 4 I put on the right are all very good, breaking things down very generally, so a general audience will not be overwhelmed by these, but can keep up with some of the massive events that are occurring in AI. I've put a couple of links to some of my presentations and papers and projects that I've mentioned. All of the projects that I've mentioned here have, a lot of them have papers behind them and also presentations if you want to research anything further in terms of, for example, how to put together a data research repository, or what do you think, how do you even begin to start thinking about infrastructures for AI for libraries? I have articles on that in terms of research papers and presentations, and I put some of those here for the more academic ones and that section, but the general ones are also available here. In terms of the human AI benchmarking, I also recommend another fellow. His name is Dr. Alan Thompson, who actually is very good on also breaking down globally what's going on with AI. And I thank you all for your attention today. I know it's been a longer talk to get through all of this, but I think it has. I really appreciate the time, and I would be happy to stay on and answer any questions anybody has.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you, Ray. It's amazing. Amazing indeed. We appreciate you so much. We appreciate you so much. Please, let me hand over to the coordinator. I'm excited. I'm thrilled. That's why I had to talk. Wonderful.
Professor Anunobi, I'm very, very happy to give this talk, and so happy actually to be giving it to Africa, because I think it's time for this type of talk. So yeah. I very much appreciate being able to give it.
Oh,
we appreciate so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ray, for this insightful and wonderful presentation. Okay, I can see not just myself, because I had an enjoyable session. I can see the National Librarian cannot keep her joy. She has to spit that out. Thank you so much, Dr. Ray. Okay, so quickly we have some couple of questions. We have tried to create some, so we would read them out one after the other. And
sure.
We have about 8 of them, so we will not be reading them at once. So read them one after the other while you answer them adequately. Okay, the first question is for myself. You know, the kind of education we have
during our days in the library schools, we do not have access to content on programming, coding, and the likes. And then the world of librarianship is actually changing, and then few of us are making efforts to merge the knowledge into our library service provision. So I want to ask about recommender system. I believe it's going to aid our reference service provision. So in this line, what do you think? What are the starting points? How do you think we need to start?
Well, that's an excellent question. In terms of resources, I think that there's a lot of resources currently available on the web. There's ways to actually start for, first of all, librarians who are interested in taking up these areas to actually, well, first of all, my gut feeling would be for the librarians to begin using the main models. The main one to start with, even if you don't have a subscription, is Microsoft Copilot. It's available to everyone. It's freely available, and it gives you an idea of how large language models work. Beyond that, in terms of next steps, prompt engineering is very, very important for libraries and beginning to actually work with that. And there's a lot of also resources available on the web. I've also compiled, I have to admit, larger bibliographies of resources that are available on the link I have here at the bottom in terms of my ResearchGate profile and my Vita in terms of how to begin these types of infrastructures for libraries. And my suggestion is start with groups that you have in your own libraries and putting together actually groups of people that might be working with AI. This is how it started for us in 2000 and I suppose it was 17, and it was myself getting the group together saying we should start thinking about a project that way, and then gathering the people together that are interested in those areas, and slowly starting that way. But if you're not going to start with a project in terms of a digitization project or an AI project, the way to start is with ChatGPT 4. And to actually even start with that persona slide that I showed in terms of the persona that I created, Dr. Amina Okoye, and taking that prompt and then saying, well, this isn't what we need in Africa, or it would be actually good to modify this prompt this way and see what the response is. And then actually start to test the prompt with, I wondered when I was putting that prompt together, how well does the language model speak Nigerian languages? And to start that way, and to be benchmarking the models in terms of local needs and then local questions that are arising. So hopefully that could help a little bit, Elijah.
Okay. So thank you so much.
Let me just drop a question and then you people continue. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, Dr. Ray, thank you so very much. But I want to ask a question that relates to what we are actually doing in the National Library. One is the idea, what was done in Spain and is still ongoing, that they are using AI to collate all publications in Spanish language. Now, Nigeria is a multinational, multilingual country, so many, about 500-600. And we think that some of the digitized and those in electronic format, born digital, are there online. Is there any way the AI can help us to collect and gather them and get the data sets for them? That's one. The second question is, we already have a digital repository. What can AI do for us to amplify or enhance the repository for discoverability? The third one is, if in Nigeria, for example, we have a lot of our information resources or literature in print format. I want to believe that it is only when the resources are digitized and put in the cloud or put in the internet that AI will use it to respond to questions that will come up. That's the three questions. Yeah.
Yes, Professor Anunobi, those are all great questions, but those are also complex questions. So all of those things that you mentioned, they're all possible. For the National Library, those would also be complex projects. So, for example, in terms of the first question that you asked, in terms of gathering all of those documents, for the Spanish for the Spanish National Library, they limited their, first of all, how they did it is, as I understand from the article, what they did was they, first of all, crawled the web in terms of Spanish language documents. So they, first of all, limited their the scope of the projects simply not to all Spanish language documents that are also in print and not digitized and not even available, but only the ones that were actually easily available globally and in Spanish. And that was, even as you saw from my slide with regards to that, there was a huge amount of documentation. Now from there, the idea, like my idea, how the Spaniards did it, and I thought this was an excellent idea, is partnering with their supercomputing center. So in that article, and that Dr. Anunobi, the article is also available on the IFLA site, and also on my Vita, in terms of the journal issue. The whole journal issue was on artificial intelligence. And then that article with the people that were involved are also able to be contacted. My suggestion would be actually reaching out to one of the people. Her name is Elena Sanchez, and she's also on the IT standing committee. But the key there is that the National Library, even of Spain, did not do it themselves. They partnered with the supercomputing center. So it would be similar. My intuition is that, especially for Nigeria, which is also a very large country, as you were mentioning with many languages, that there would need to be a similar partnership with the similar agency or the similar, it might be a university that has the largest supercomputing infrastructure that's working on AI questions in Nigeria with regards to that. So that partnership is very important. The other thing I could mention is that there are international entities that are working on these types of projects that could be approached. The one that immediately comes to mind for me, that is, I know that Google is working with Mali on these, I guess they're Islamic document digitization in Timbuktu, in terms of these 1,200-year-old documents, and then partnering with them. And so I think all of those methodologies would probably be the best ones to pursue there, because what I see from these projects is that they do involve both either the National Library or the university, the librarians and their sets of skills, married with also the technology skills. So that I think that could probably answer the other questions too, because those partnerships would also need to be pursued on those other levels in terms of actually enabling, for example, where you mentioned also the discovery layer in terms of the National Library's discovery layer. Again, how that would work technologically is that you would be deciding also to partner with, for example, Google's Gemini 1.5 that I mentioned as a foundation model, or on the other hand, OpenAI's ChatGPT-4, and then the other, your data and then the National Library's valence of that is what is called fine-tuned on top of it. So they talk about the foundation model. You wouldn't actually be building another huge model. You would be fine-tuning your data and marrying it to these other models that are working as the foundation model to help you fine-tune your model. I think that's the best way I can answer those two.
Prof, are you still with us, ma? National Librarian, ma? Okay.
Yes, I'm there. I think he has just given us a lead. A lead is that we should try to see who we can partner with in the area of digitization and discoverability of the resources that are already on the internet.
Yes, definitely. And then I would actually contact your counterparts in Africa that are already working with Google, say, for example, on that digitization project, to get in touch with the people there on those developmental projects, because there's definitely interest in those areas, but it would have to be through actually the right channels. I did work for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation years ago, when they were still doing their ATLA awards, which were awards to global libraries. But right now, because artificial intelligence is still so new and we're really in the first years of that, I don't think those levels have yet been established in terms of those formalized structures, but it would be good to reach out to your counterparts there. Another fellow, again, I could mention that is on the IFLA IT section, African representative from Mali. His name is Suleiman Sugoba, and his email address is also on the Trends and Issues in Library Technology. Or another person I could mention, and I think her name is also, and her email address is also on the journal, on our bulletins list of IT section names. Her name is Lynn Kleinvelt, and perhaps they can also put you in touch with other people. But I think Suleiman would probably be one of the people that's definitely involved with Mali and those areas.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. No, the time has been fast spent, but we still have questions that are needed to be answered. Okay, so I'm going to collate them, similar questions. I'm going to match them together, marry them together, so that we can save our time. So I have this question from Mirabel. The question goes thus: is there any API for the development of AI chatbots that is free? Which API is actually best for the development of intelligent chatbots?
Well, the way I would go with that in terms of, I wouldn't be using an API. How it's been simplified enough to actually be using the GPT-4 store. So there were those couple slides I showed, and I'm not sure if I could go back to them now, but the ones in that showed the store with the education and then the research. And there's, once you have a subscription to a GPT, you can actually very simply, not with too much effort, actually develop your own personal that way. And that's the way I would be going. And it's really a no code solution that would be a lot easier for librarians. And I would actually encourage that type of development in terms of chatbots for Nigeria, definitely. To try to, first of all, try that methodology. And it's a simpler methodology that doesn't require a lot of coding or the API, but it's also a powerful one that leverages the power of GPT-4.
Okay, thank you. And so I have this question from Mr. Osman. The question goes thus: how AI could be applied in our daily routines as librarians, such as housekeeping process, facilitating information access and training? And are there some specific AI designed for libraries and information centers?
Well, the main methodology I would use on that is the persona. So that persona slide that I used in terms of creating a persona with Dr. Amina Okoye, and then setting the parameters in terms of expertise that you're looking for. And then that could actually help the African information centers. So I would look at that slide that I used as a model and customize it for yourself and be working with that and the GPTs, and then also benchmarking those results, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. So we'll be expecting that from you. God bless you for that. So I have this question also from Mrs. Mercy. Can you discuss any potential challenges? Okay, sorry. But can you discuss any potential challenges or ethical considerations associated with the integration of AI in information management?
Well, there's definitely a lot of challenges in terms of AI and then information centers. I think the best thing to do though is to begin. So and I think small steps are also very, very important. I showed some of those slides, and if you remember, there were mistakes in them. The models were making mistakes. My staff also, in implementing some of the algorithms, were making mistakes. But that making mistakes was also leading to actually better answers and learning. So there was a lot of learning going on. So from, I would say, 2017 to 2020, there were a lot of mistakes made, but by 2020, a lot of those mistakes had been worked out. And so that's how I would proceed, by baby steps, and then trying to take on projects that are not huge projects, but actually doable projects. So we never started with grand AI large projects. Remember, at the beginning of the presentation, I began with the data research repository and getting all the expertise down with that. And that's sort of a laddering step towards more complex projects. That's how I would begin.
Okay, thank you so much. And I have this last question. The question goes thus: what skills or knowledge do professionals need to acquire in order to efficiently work with AI in information management?
Well, I think
before you answer that, I would like you to explain this in a layman's language, because I do understand that we have some people that are trying to bridge the digital, gap. They are trying to do something on digital literacy, just trying to educate themselves into the digital world. So I would like you to explain this with a layman term. Thank you.
Sure. So the main, first of all, I think that the main skill is curiosity and the willingness to actually be curious and want to learn. So just the desire to actually work with AI is going to be the best way to get started. As I mentioned, the first thing I would be doing if I was just starting with AI, the very, very first thing is not starting with projects or even the data research repository or anything. I would be actually starting with a chatbot. And I would be starting with a very powerful chatbot, and the very powerful one that's available globally right now, and I'm pretty sure it's available in Nigeria, is Microsoft Copilot. And I would be beginning with Microsoft Copilot and beginning to actually work with the model on the level of language and asking questions and seeing how the model answers, because that question response skill is as that develops from very simple questions and answers to much more complex questioning and answers. And then that development of that skill is called prompt engineering. So the prompts are actually, first of all, they began as simple questions, but then as you learned how these models work, or as you begin to understand the level of a deep complexity that they have, you begin to understand that if you ask a more structured or complex question, they can elicit much better answers. And again, I would point you to that slide that I made with regards to that Dr. Amina Okoye example. That's a prompt, but that's a prompt engineered prompt that sets the stage for the parameters that you want the model to exhibit, all done through language. And that would be the way that I would begin that process.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. I think even as an ordinary librarian without any digital skills, I know where to start from. And I want to believe that the National Librarian, as a digital National Librarian, we know how to be. We look towards that direction to see that every librarian are well equipped with AI knowledge. So I think we can start from Microsoft Copilot. We want to see our participants start something on Microsoft Copilot, and National Library will be happy to guide them through the creation process. I believe we can also organize a training specifically on Microsoft Copilot, the prompt engineering and the likes. So thank you so much for today's session. It's an enjoyable one. And I don't know if the National Librarian has something to say before we call it a day. Thank you.
Well, I don't have anything to say except to say thank you, Dr. Ray, for your time. It has been so great. It's been so handsome. It's been so amazing. We thank you, and we know that this is the beginning of it. You will not leave us. We are part of IFLA, and I know IFLA IT section is you. So whenever we call you, you answer us, even linking us up with some people that could be of help. Like the coordinator Aziz said, we have to start somewhere. We can start with the Microsoft Copilot, that's that box. So by the time we go subscribe to it, and when we expand our competencies in the National Library, we will try to begin to help others. So you are all welcome, and I know that you go try your hand. It is not rocket science. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Ma. I think the chief host and our guest speaker deserve a sounding round of applause. Can we give them a sounding round of applause for this wonderful session? Thank you, Prof, and thank you, Doctor, for this time. So from here, we can then, we also like to appreciate all our participants, for staying for over 2 hours plus. I keep on, checking the time. Thank you so much, God bless you. You have a wonderful day.
Chinwe and Elijah, it was a pleasure actually speaking to your group today. I think it's a super exciting time. I'm very heartened that you want to actually begin, and everybody in Nigeria in terms of good going with this. It's an exciting and great time to begin. A lot of the world has not actually began yet, but this is the time. This is definitely the year to begin thinking about these areas. And it was a very pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.
Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah.
And bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye. 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 So good.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alex.